Today, I'm talking to Ryan Parker, who's the Chief Legal Officer at SixFifty, which is an HR compliance solution provider that helps companies navigate employment laws, generate compliant documents, and keep up with changing requirements. Ryan, thanks so much for joining HR Snacks.
Joel, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you've had a really impressive career in government. You had over a decade at the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, which kind of sounds like some Jack Ryan stuff going on there. So, how's the transition been from doing that to going to the startup world at SixFifty?
It's been really interesting and I've really enjoyed it. I love my time in the government. I worked with really interesting people. I was a career employee, so I worked with people across administrations on big, interesting cases, and I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot about being a lawyer. But I'll tell you, Joel, it's a little bit hard to be in a profession where you're always at an adversarial posture with those around you, in litigation, where they're always reading your emails, wondering if they could attach them to a court filing to the judge. And so it was really a unique opportunity for me to move from litigation into the startup world, where instead of everything being adversarial, almost everything we do is cooperative. I'm working with an engineering team to build a product. I'm working with the marketing team to get collateral put together. I'm working with the sales team to help present our product in the best way. And those things are really fun. So it's been a great change for me.
Well, I'm glad to have you on because we're rolling into a new administration coming in, and it's typical to expect some level of policy change, regulation changes with a new administration. That's certainly of interest, right, for businesses, for HR teams that are having to try to navigate these potential shifts. So, where do you see the biggest potential changes happening in the HR compliance landscape in 2025?
Yeah, great question. I think you see change in every administration, but this one is a little unique because we've actually seen this administration before. We have a pretty good idea of what a Trump administration looks like from the last time he was in office. And so I think that it's maybe not as hard to forecast how employment laws might change at the federal level as it would be if we were having a brand new administration. I guess I could break that answer into two parts. I think there are some things that the Biden administration did or tried to do that will probably die on the vine or be repealed. And some of those big ones are, the Biden administration tried to institute a non-compete ban, which was actually stayed in court. And it'll be interesting to see what the Trump administration does with that if they decide not to appeal. But I think that likely is dead and that will go away. A court had already stopped it. The Biden administration tried to raise the exempt employee threshold. And that was a big change where the minimum amount that employees could make and still be considered exempt employees was going to be raised significantly. And that was also recently stayed by a court. And I think that will probably also die. That wasn't going to be a big change. There were a lot of employers, I think, who already had given their employees raises to make sure that they stayed exempt. And just as a refresher, exempt employees are those employees that don't have to be paid overtime, for example. And so employers want to keep their employees exempt. And the new rule would have raised that threshold for a number of the exemptions by a significant amount, almost $20,000 for many different employees. And we actually saw some employers who gave raises to hundreds of their employees. And then when the rule was overturned, let them know that they would be taking those raises back in January. And so, some of these things are going to have big effects on employees, but I think those are examples of two things that the Biden administration tried to do that will be ended. On the other hand, things that I think this administration will try to do, one thing they did last time is they changed the test for employees and contractors. Both the Biden administration and the Trump administration said, we're using the economic realities test. We just look at it differently. But the last time during the Trump administration, they really only looked at two of a number of factors. And those are the nature and degree of control that the employer has over the work and the worker's opportunity for profit or loss. And they kind of said, those two sum up all the other factors. This is the way we're going to do it. Businesses, I think, were excited about this new sort of formulation of the test. But at the end of the day, I think there's been a lot of debate about whether it even mattered. But I think that's something that we'll see early on, is that there'll be this new emphasis on these two factors in the employer and contractor determination that the Department of Labor makes. So I think those are things that you can expect. I'll just add one more, and that's that under the Trump administration, I think we're likely to see them cut back on government protections for sexual orientation or gender identity. And, we had the Bostock Supreme Court decision that sort of said that Title VII protects against discrimination on those bases, but there are a whole host of different federal regulations and the like that prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex. And we may see the administration try to say, no, that doesn't cover sexual orientation or gender identity. At least we saw that last time, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that again.
Yeah, and with the changes happening at the federal level and adjustments, do you see states picking up more what they feel like are the gaps and bigger differentiation between state regulations than we already have right now?
Absolutely. I think that is probably the most likely outcome of a Trump administration. And I think we're already seeing a little bit with the non-compete ban, for example, being stayed in court. We've seen a whole bunch of states introduce legislation to limit or ban non-competes in their states. Yeah. We saw a number of states that passed new thresholds for exempt, non-exempt on the state level, salary thresholds. And so I think you've kind of hit on maybe the theme that we'll see in this administration, which is that the federal government will be less involved. It will not step in to protect employees. And if anything, it may cut back employee protections. And that will leave it to the states then to step in and fill those gaps. And I think we'll see some states that do that and some that don't. But as you mentioned, what will likely happen is the gap will continue to widen between the states that protect their employees and the states that are less interested in protecting their employees. And we'll see more variation among the states, which is a real challenge, frankly, for employers to keep up with all those changes to state law and the differences between states, especially in sort of this new economy where we have so many remote workers.